Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's first seminar. My name is Jan Palmer, and I'm very pleased today to introduce Dinara Alimkhanova. She's a PhD student who's very close to her final defense. Right. Right. Actually, I met Dinara because I taught her research methods way back when she started, and I was fascinated with her topic on NEET youth in Kazakhstan way back then. So I'm excited to hear how far this project has developed. So welcome, and I'll hand the floor over to Dinara.
Thank you, Janet. So good afternoon again. My name is Dinara. So excited to see you. I'm excited to share my time my study. And I'm also happy to present my supervisor behind now. And I also much appreciation goes to my co-supervisors, Rabo and Philip Bolat. So thank you if you're online, but anyway. So the topic, so basically this is my doctoral study. And the topic is on determining the socio-economic, socio-demographic, and economic factors that affect NEET use. So basically, factors that bring to this NEET circumstance in Kazakhstan. I'll go through my background, research context, and theoretical framework. I'll give snapshots from literature reviews and methodology, which will be followed by the findings, and I'll try to respond to the question, so what? And I'll finalize with limitations, recommendations, and implications. So many of you might not be encountered, right, or experienced with this NEET concept. But for your referral, NEET stands for Not in Employment, Education, and Training. The percentage of this population, which I took the age from 15 to 24, are particularly people who haven't been employed and haven't been engaged in any formal or informal type of education in the past 4 weeks prior to the survey. By survey, I mean labor force survey, which is NEET basically calculated from. And so, like, you may forget for now this in a definition, but just let's say who is NEET use in a simple word, right? So if a person right now is not working and not engaged in any kind of formal or informal educational or any training opportunity, then he's classified as NEET, not an education for anything. But maybe, but basically they may have, for example, higher education, let's say, doctoral student, let's say, graduate, who haven't been employed, let's say, for 2 months, and then he falls into this category of NEET. So, of course, when we are in the analysis, we'll see their levels, for example, by educational level, by age, stuff. But don't misunderstand that they are uneducated people. They might be educated. So this labor force survey, which I'll be referring in many times, is conducted by statistics office in Kazakhstan and all over the world. And it's conducted like monthly, and the data is reliable. So overall, contextually, this NEET concept is composed of 2 major subcategories, which are unemployed and inactive needs. The difference between these unemployed people are seeking for a job. They are willing to work and they are ready to work, while inactive, they are not ready to work or seek job because of different reasons, such as they involve in childcare responsibilities, elderly, or maybe they took gap year, or let's say they experience severe kind of disability. So these are 2 major factors. But the literature responds why this NEET indicator is actually gathered, collected all over the world mainly, and why it's important, because its percentage somewhat allows us to to evaluate the degree of vulnerability in a society among youth people. And also, these socioeconomic factors or not, yeah, socio-demographic and economic factors might be chronic or they might be transferable to adulthood. That's why it's very important to capture and track these factors. And of course, being unemployed and inactive does not usually is not usually productive. Is not produce good like productive human capital in a country. Yeah. So this is a brief chronology of emergence of NEET concept. It actually emerged in the UK back 2019, where they started to capture that more people started to drop education in the employment sectors. And the concept then spread across 2000s across Europe. And in 2000, the International Labour Organization developed this methodology. And then research expanded in developed countries, followed by like in developing countries, but specifically in Central Asia, the discussion about NEET started around 2015 in Central Asian countries. Then since 2017, Kazakhstan started to bring initiatives how to engage with youth into society. However, those documentations were more superficial, just grabbing different indicators from different documents, and it wasn't that, let's say, practical, applicable to use. And behind this, video, you'll see January unrest 2022. Why I indicated this? Because right after January unrest 2022, the policymakers started revisiting this series of NEET issue because they saw that many people are from the so-called social background. They're like they receive low salary, unemployed, and however they brought on the table on agenda a document on again the revisiting this issue, but it then wasn't further explicitly developed further. Yes. Yeah, these are policy addresses. So in since 2001, as we see, NEET is tracked in this labor force service through the labor force service. So it has been 24 years that this indicator has been tracked in Kazakhstan. But since only after 16 years, International World Bank first conducted the first study on NEET use in Kazakhstan, and this NEET indicator was added in state educational development programs of 2015-19, 2025. And a couple of documents were developed, but again, as I said, they were very superficial. Yes, in January analyst. Okay, next. So, what are my research problem? My first research problem refers to that more young people have begun to withdraw from education and labor market since 2011, because as I said, NEET indicator is always higher than unemployed youth, because unemployed sits within it, right? However, since 2011, this gap between unemployment and real life NEET rate has been widening, and I wanted to understand what factors have people that started contributing to this gap. And of course, undermining, empirical research in transition times, like developing countries like Kazakhstan, and none of the research have ever employed this labor force survey. Yeah. Yes. The purpose of the study is to identify social demographic and economic factors contributing young people on becoming NEET in Kazakhstan. Particularly, I have just three research questions. First is, how have NEET trends evolved in Kazakhstan over the past decade? Second, what social demographic variables have been associated with NEET or otherwise contributed to this NEET rate? And I also wanted to explore how these social demographic and economic factors shape the elite experiences of NEET in Kazakhstan. Yeah. I use theoretical framework of Jekyll and Gisbert of 2004 on social exclusion. Particularly, he divided factors into three levels: micro, meso, and macro. This conceptual framework was convenient for me to organize my factors and to see what factors particularly lead to this need situation. Those factors are usually negative because we do not expect good factors to bring to social exclusion, right? So yeah, maybe they like let's say micro may include age, gender, or household size. Meso like institutional factors, and macro are more governmental and social factors. Next. I'll be brief with the literature, but as you can see, there were more micro factors revealed in the literature that affect this need circumstance. Particularly, literature says that age, while a young person becomes elder, he or she has higher chances to become a NEET. For gender, women usually are 2 times, or in some countries 3 or 4 times higher to become a NEET, or let's say to become jobless or inactive compared to their male counterparts. In terms of location, it really varies. In some countries, like rural needs are prone to become NEET. In some countries, in urban areas, but it may change, for example, over time. So there's no like explicit either like tendency how location affects people. Education, mostly NEET were mostly associated with secondary and vocational education. In terms of household size, women who grew in extended families, they were more prone to become NEET. And marriage also varied across countries. For meso and macro, it's factors like, for example, lack of support and career guidance in schools, barriers in school to work transition, urban migration, or informal employment, with the main like macro factors that put young people at these situations. Particularly in my study, I applied as explanatory sequential mixed method. For the point, I used labor force survey and analyzed through SPSS and R programming. Basically, namely, I applied like descriptive and logistic regression analysis. For qualitative data, I interviewed 20 participants. Coach. Okay, next. Yeah, I think I will mention it in the methods. These were variables I specifically analyzed in the quantitative part. There are 11 variables. Let's see, like gender, geographic location, marital status, having children, age, living status. By living status, we tracked how living from birth or living after birth would affect the religious. Then mobility, it also like tracks like moving history, let's see, yeah, of participants.
And educational attainment, household size, inactivity reasons. So, which answers to the question directly, why NEET youth are inactive? And we checked across regions. I like cross mobility and household size because sampling size was not sufficient to analyze this data. Therefore, finally, I left with not 11 but 9 independent variables. For the dependent variable, I calculated the state of binary variable. So my variable was binary. Either my outcome was NEET or non-NEET. Therefore, I used logistic regression. Oh, thank you. Oh, good, yeah. Sample size, yeah. This was for the quantitative. You can see, yeah. So this is overall sampling size of the labor force survey across 10 years. Was over than 4 million participants. But within these, young people from 15 to 24 compose like around 600,000. Among these youth, NEET youth composed around 40,000 across 10 years. And I then finally calculated this NEET rate, which like fluctuates from 5 up to I think 7 or even 9% in the past decade. For the qualitative part, I interviewed 20 participants aged from 18 to 24. However, my focus was to interview people from 15 to 24. That was my limitation, and I'll refer to it a bit later. So you'll see here the sampling size in the qualitative part, almost equal number of males and females, but since I'll tell you a bit. But since actually expected to have more females because gender was very significantly affected with NEET youth. However, my gatekeepers like youth center or NGOs that provided me, the access to participants. So provided me whoever they could provide because NEET is actually very hard to reach people. You cannot just, find these people on the street and, ask for interview. I tried best to use my social network, but it was all helpless. But anyway, this is what I ended up with. So you can see distribution by location. 7 were from urban, 10 from rural, and 3 from monotowns. Monotone for your referral is like a small city, which is mainly, let's say, where people mainly refer working, for example, in a big factory in that monotone, or a couple of factories, let's say, in that monotone. By education, you see most of them had school and vocational education, and by unique reasons, 14 were unemployed people who I interviewed, meaning that they were ready to work, but couldn't find jobs, and 6 were inactive youth. Also here, the sampling, the research site was Karaganda city. Why Karaganda? Because Karaganda historical has shown highest need in Kazakhstan. That was the first reason. And also Karaganda is actually an industrial city, which is not expected actually to have, this such higher percentage of needs. So I wanted to see why, being, despite such industrial city, the region kept having a high need rate across Kazakhstan. Throughout Kazakhstan. And yeah, these were like main justifications for choosing Karaganda. Yeah, the most interesting part, I think, findings. So findings pertaining to the first question, which sounds, how have NEET trends evolved in Kazakhstan over the past decade? So basically, I wanted to see the tendency. And these findings will be mainly in percentages, okay? And the second question, in the second question, we'll see what factors really contributed. So this is for you just to refer to see the trends, to observe the trends. Yeah, what we see is that NEET rate has been historically higher for women. Again, to remind, I focus on age range 15 to 24. But for example, if we take age range 15-28, this is much higher. So if it's like 6.3 for women, in a higher cohort, it will be like 9%. So, but anyway, women always persistently show high percentage of needs compared to men. In terms of location, as you may observe, yeah, it was higher for rural, but when we see in the division by gender, we see that both in urban areas and rural areas, women still keep like showing a higher percentage compared to their male counterparts. We also can observe that need increases with age because this is the cohort, for example, within my focus of age. If we divide it like from 15 to 19, from 20 to 22, we see that this is higher. Older cohort shows much higher percentage, like I think like 3 times higher percentage compared to the younger cohort. This is justified by the fact that while being younger, more young people are engaged still in education. And however, when they reach this age, many of them in a transition period, building families, for example, and many factors that, manipulating this transition thing. However, again, if we see it by gender, in a young cohort, the gap is not that much observed, right? So it's more or less similar. However, again, in a higher cohort, women show higher percentage compared to like twice higher, almost percentage compared to their to male needs. And again, yeah, we'll talk more about in the qualitative part. In terms of education, let's see how needs have broken down in terms of education. Across past 10 years, we see that need was more associated with vocational education, yes, in orange. Despite that, the rate has been decreasing. Like in it still shows the highest rate compared to other educational attainments. However, if we see in terms of higher education, for example, it's almost persistent, like around from 9 to 6%. But yes, higher education is also. But graduate level, it fluctuates very much. So we cannot say. Okay, we will see in a second question. But this is like distribution. So by educational attainment. But also literature, as I said, literature also shows high persistence of NEET use with secondary and vocational attainment. Yeah, in terms of again education, I didn't put here like primary, secondary levels, but when it comes to vocational education and higher education, the gap sharply increases between genders. Women showing higher, 2 times or almost higher tendency to fall into this NEET category. By having children, we see that people who have children, they show 3 times higher, higher association to become a NEET. However, when we also break down by gender, people who don't have children, there's no much gap. However, among young people who have children, women show 5 or 6, even 6 times higher tendency to become a NEET compared to men. So the most interesting part, what specific social and demographic variables have been associated with NEET use in Kazakhstan since 2011? So I did, this is like general table where I did binary logistic regression. Why binary? Because my outcome variable was being NEET or not being NEET. And here, those 9 variables were included. Yeah, gender, rurality, marital status, having children, age, educational levels, living status, living from birth or living not from birth. So across 10 years, we can observe that gender, basically reference group here is being a female, having children, age, and educational background, educational level, have been significantly associated with being a NEET in Kazakhstan. These were factors were the most prominent. Okay, next. So being a, okay, this is binary logistic, yeah? And so the main thing is that being a female, having children, it NEET increases with age. So older you become, higher chance to become to be without job and not be involved in education. In terms of educational level, lower education you have, higher chances to become a NEET. So because the outcome of educational level was negatively significant. So NEET itself is a negative concept. So we cannot say like, being having higher education equals NEET. So having a lower educational level is highly associated with being NEET in this case. Since we found that gender was very prominent like variable that contributed to this NEET situation, we did intersection analysis where to this being female, we included like having children, being from rural area. So one of them is being female and having children under 3 years old. Constantly and significantly was associated with being NEET in Kazakhstan since 2016. Because this question was included this year, so but you can see how it's constantly significant across in the past like 8 years. And then we also included being a female and getting higher education, which was also strongly associated, but just recently since 2020. It's interesting, yeah. For women, if you have higher education, you are more prone to be without job or not to be engaged in education. I will try to explain it in the poll part. Also, being female and having children, and plus possessing higher education was strongly and constantly associated with being NEET. You see, it had been like here, if education was was significantly associated in the past 3 years, but when we added like children, it was constantly associated with being NEET. So these 3 factors, being female, having higher education, and having children under 3, affected, usually puts young women at risk situations. Also, we checked this being a female and rurality background, but it didn't have any significant effect across in the past 10 years. Because we sometimes expect that if you are from rural area, you might have this chance to education, employment, but it wasn't found here. The significance to this rurality, we also checked for having children. So to this being female from rural area and having children, yeah, we added having children, but the significance was fluctuating, but yeah, maybe we can see it was like significant, yeah, but highly significant was in 2021 and 16. Yeah, this is while I want to say I just added it today because I haven't run the regression for this analysis, but still I think it's very important. So you may now this is like just more descriptive, right? So we said that NEET is composed of unemployed people and inactive. With unemployed people, it's a bit easier to work, right? To provide more job opportunities, because they are ready to work. But with inactive, it's very difficult to work because you don't know why they are inactive. So my research found that in this through this labor force survey why young NEETs are inactive, particularly NEETs, right? So majority of these NEETs were not working and studying due to health reasons. Another higher portion goes to they are not working and studying because they're looking after family or home, for example. But there is no further distribution, so I cannot say why. Yeah, whether they what are the particular reasons for that? And another, the third portion goes to due to they are not engaged in employment and education due to family or personal circumstances. Then a few like percentage goes for discharge. I think it's like good, maybe, I don't know, because having a high number of discharge. So by discharge, I think I need to clarify here. Discharge people are those who fed up with looking for a job. So they gave up basically to look for job or educational opportunities because they did it many times and hope closed. So then they left being discharged. So this percentage is few, but still is there. And interestingly, high percentage pertains to those who don't simply know where and how to search for the information about education and job opportunities. Some say looking forward to start of new season. It's very tiny, but still there. But the most interesting, I think, goes there when it comes to health reasons. We see more men with health issues compared to women. And I think it's for family and looking after family reasons, we have more women on this country. But interestingly, here I presented the data only for 2022, but across 10 years, this men percentage has increased, like I think from 8 to 19. So it means that more like men started looking after family. I don't know what are particular reasons, but the percentage of men who looked after family or home increased actually in the past 10 years. Yeah, in my formative part, since these variables are limited, I wanted to explore more. So what are the reasons behind all this, apart from those 9 factors? I'm sorry, it's not literature review, but qualitative findings. So for age, similarly, like in the literature review, age among the participants increased with age. So more they were older they were like without formal like qualifications. They were struggling to find employment and educational opportunities. Gender, being a woman and inactive was explained by childcare responsibilities and health issues in the qualitative part. So I think it's one of the main like responses to the quantitative findings that why there are more females, because many of them are engaged in childcare or elderly care or family care responsibilities. Location, youth in rural areas, especially women, were more exposed to isolation. They didn't have any like support compared to men. They didn't allow, for example, themselves to move around the city compared to men again. Education, most of them had secondary and vocational education. Household size, close to half participants, like 40%, it's like 8 participants were from extended families. Extended families mean if a family has from 4 and more children in a family, so in Kazakhstan we say extended family, or plus, yeah. And then marriage, married women with children tend to be inactive compared to their married but without children female counterparts. So yeah, so childcare was one of the main barriers to find employment for them or to continue education. Health issues. I had 4 participants with being inactive due to health reasons, but 2 of them had short-term like disease, while 2 had long-term chronic health issues that she couldn't allow to study, for example, properly, allocating not sufficient time, for example, for study. Massive factors, poor education quality in rural areas, one of the factors that, for example, put young people in vocational education, but then vocational education exacerbated the situation. Poor career guidance at all levels, school, vocational education, and higher education. Families also, participants were struggling with financial hardship, poverty, limited educational background. And also, I saw this interesting circulation of low education attainment. The majority of NEET's parents had vocational education and who were also involved in unstable, seasonal, low-paid jobs. And their children consequently also had mainly vocational education background. While, despite the fact that most of them were aware of these labor departments who usually provide this employment and, let's say, training services, they didn't rely on them, participants. Only like 5 participants out of 20, 5 participants out of, I think 18 participants said they know what's labor departments and where they, but only 5 of them approached because they didn't rely on their services. And poor rural infrastructure was the main factor. One, for example, a participant said, I majored in primary teaching, but most of them, my friends, work in Karaganda. However, commuting from Sarai to Karaganda was a main challenge because it takes you at least half an hour. Buses usually are crowded in the morning, and there are only like 2 buses that commute to Karaganda city. So this rural area infrastructure to the city or within the rural area was one of the barriers to find proper employment or education. Yeah, macro risk factors. 19, it means almost all of them were involved in informal employment. So here I should say that while NEET use are not expected anyway with this to be working, but in Kazakhstan they were working. So I think there is I argue that there is a conceptual misunderstanding of using NEET and using it like conceptualizing this NEET and working with this NEET use. Because many of them still work. Let's say who I interviewed 20 participants, they say, I mean, it was very hard, for example, to find discouraged, who gave up just employment and education. But many of them were working. So I don't know how to clue this informal employment, but they all were working. And I think macro unattractive career centers also pertain to this macro risk factors because they're main providers of the services. And if they are ineffective, it means that the whole system will not work properly for this at-risk use. And COVID effects and the poor quality of medical support pertain to both rural and urban areas. These were my main qualitative findings. So I come to discussion. So what, right? We saw that these factors like age, gender, household size, poor education quality, low service of labor departments, or let's say informal employment, they all bring this social exclusion of these people. Young mothers with children, both genders with health issues, mainly for men, and informal employment. So in terms of informal employment, I want to clarify that, again, how we collect NEET rate with the labor force survey, which is reliable, collected every month, and you can, at the end, finalize annual rate and etc. But how youth centers work with this NEET use is very different. They track they understand the NEET use as those who didn't get pension allocation for the past 6 months. So if you didn't get any pension allocation in the past 6 months, you are automatically captured as NEET because there is no other way for them to capture those NEET use. They don't know how. So that was the main, I'll bring it as a main argument of my studies that there is conceptual misunderstanding within the system how NEET use is understood in Kazakhstan. Now, there are some limitations. Of course, it's number of variables in the labor force survey. If, for example, it included more variables, actually, like includes 100 questions, but only 11 I could capture, like I could analyze, I could relate to this NEET situation. But it would be better to see more specific variables that could show NEET situation, right? A small sample size in the qualitative part and qualitative sampling composition was the main challenge for me because I didn't include people with severe disabilities who are real needs, right? Discouraged use, they were in my focus, but again, we couldn't find them. And youth maybe from far rural areas, maybe they might have very different challenges, those who live nearer to the cities. And the main challenge was to find youth between 15 to 17 while they were in my focus. They are coming in the area. They are nowhere, no one tracks them. So that's the main, I think, while, okay, their percentage is tiny, but they are nowhere. So no one tracks them. And also I'll bring it as an argument in the study. What I recommend, my sufficient chunk of recommendations go to the labor force survey because it's the only instrument that can capture this need. So mainly, I recommend to include variables such as socioeconomic status of participants, ethnicity, more specific responses to options to this question. For what reasons haven't you been engaged in any employment in the past 4 weeks? So this is the main question which captures this NEET situation. So I would, for example, recommend to include due to taking care of children, elderly care, maybe it's voluntary choice for some, right? And maybe there's no flexible jobs to combine with childcare responsibilities. For example, I had a participant who would bake cake at home, but her job wasn't recognized as a formal. And then high cost of childcare services, it was found in the qual part, but maybe, I don't know, maybe it can be one of the reasons why they don't put their children in the kindergarten, right? Especially, I mean, families. And availability of childcare services, it may pertain, for example, to rural areas. And in terms of health issue, I think it's crucial to include some options like if you have health issues, is it long-term or short-term? Or maybe other options. I'm not a medical expert, but for example, a labor force survey in the UK tracks this way. So they ask for whether you are temporary or long-term sick. Implications for future research. It would be interesting to see the long-term outcomes of NEET use in Kazakhstan, examining whether specific interventions help or do not have to include back to this NEET use. Qualitative narratives with diverse sample size, especially to understand in terms of, for example, regional differences. I think specific studies needed among young inactive women with children because they were mostly significantly associated with NEET. Tendencies across age cohorts. Usually literature divides young people into these 4 age cohorts. So my research contained these first 2. And why I didn't include this, because their factors might be far different from younger age. But I saw that, for example, if you are unemployed here, this unemployment transfers to older ages. Because I interviewed more people who are elder. And then maybe the, I don't know, again, the role of informal employment, whether it's panacea for NEET use, or it's the way how to engage them to formality. So that would be interesting to see. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dinara, for a very illuminating presentation on a very much under-researched topic. I'm sure you'll have lots of other projects that can follow up once you finish studying your PhD. Right now, I'll open the floor to a few questions. So if you have a question of Dinara, I'm sure she'd be happy to engage with you.
Overall, I just wanted to, do you understand the, yeah.
Changes in these rates, there was
This year?
Well, I think it was the one, because I noticed it too, there was a big spike around 2015 in one of those. Go back.
No, but
Okay, go forward. Yeah. There. See,
here.
yeah, see, there's a big spike in 2015.
For both genders.
Yeah.
I didn't research, frankly speaking, but one of the reasons could be aftermath economic crisis that put young people in this situation, or if we see 2015, there is always like increase this year. Yeah.
Probably changing methodology or something, probably, maybe change in the survey itself.
By the way, yeah, I also mentioned in my thesis that by 2011 or 13, I think, the sampling size of this survey was, yeah. So, you see, yeah, here. Yeah, maybe. Thank you, Dora.
Can I follow? Can I follow?
The sampling size so doubled in 2015. Maybe it was more reliable to rely on. Yeah, so I bring that in my thesis as well. Yeah.
I noticed like you're showing data starting at 2011, and when they first started, it was at like 19%. So is there a reason for that? Like if you look
Here?
at all the graphs, yeah, any of them, like.
Yeah.
Or sorry, 2001, everything was at 18-19%.
Yeah, of course, it's all related to improvement of labor department, increasing educational attainment of young people, higher education they had more chances to find employment, or for example, women started to continue their education, both men and women, they started more to continue their education. Here, for example, if we see by educational attainment, by 2000, this is from 10, right? This is, for example,
Yeah,
Yeah,
how
here.
it's at 26 and 15.
20.
No, if you look at 2001, what I'm saying is, in the beginning, why was it so high? Is that just because it's the first time they were collecting data, or?
Here.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I think it's a lot, or could be due to sampling size, but also many, for example, started to join higher education. To continue education. Maybe I can answer to you.
Okay, well, even this next graph too, you've got 21.6 and then 7.2 from in this second one for higher education.
Me here?
Yeah.
7.2. Yeah. Okay. The first thing, I didn't focus on this previous previous decade. I started to understand factors from 2011 and 12, because why again the gap between NEET rate and employment was almost similar. And it means that many of NEET at the time here. Here, right? So I didn't focus on this first previous decade because it means that many, the gap is so like tiny. It means that many of needs at that time were just unemployed, and it all maybe dependent on structural problems and than others. However, so my focus was to focus on this on the past decade. So maybe that's why I cannot answer to that question. Okay, thank you.
I'm interested, why did you work in research focus on youth from 15 to 17? Because it's like most of them can take gap year before starting university, and it's not as integrated of the socio-demographic status.
For this, first of all, why I do this research at NEET, it comes from that question. Because in order to work with that NEET youth, we all need to understand the factors they have been influenced. Once we know why they are in that situation, we can take policy actions. And so, whatever age they are, it's very important to know whether they are at a high risk or at a lower risk. If low, why it's low? If it's high, why it's high? So, my explanation to that is anyway. Despite that their percentage is very tiny, but the fact that it increases with age, you see, it means that something wrong starts from a younger age, so it gets chronic. And if we see, for example, a need rate for higher youth, older youth, it's even much higher. So it means that something gets chronic for it. And that's why it was very important for me to include 15, 17, but in full part I couldn't, because I couldn't really catch them. And because they are still under supervision of their parents, I should have received their consent. And I reached couple, but they were not willing to participate.
But what about the accessibility of information? Was it an open resource, the previous data?
But we were taught of the things.
Yeah.
So actually, the data is can be available. So this is secondary data, labor force survey, or in the statistics, it's in our local context they say fair normalization T001. So yeah, you approach, they actually provide. Also, one of the limitations is that this data is unweighted, so it needs measurement. Actually, they should be weighted in order to be able to generalize. But since these data are not weighted, it cannot be generalized. But still, it's very, very close to the official statistics. Some 36, so it can be reliable. But yes, they're accessible. You have to request. But in order to request, I, for example, asked weighted data, but they say it's not shared with the third parties. I don't know whatever reason with that. Yes, it's accessible. You have to request, but you wait for some time. Yeah. Yeah.
I will go on 2022. The government has focused on the needs. Do you know any effective government strategies?
No, they're not all effective because they don't know the reason. They all say like, shout, we have to work with this need use, but they cannot do anything because they don't know.
So we don't have anything with strategies.
No, at this point, no. For example, now my recommendation would go, for example, work with men with health issues at this particular age. And now the policy of this would be work with women with children, with their home study, I don't know, whatever they are. Yeah, so it's very important to know the subcategories of this need in order to effectively work with them.
Here's one question.
This one to ask you focus on the women with children. I want to ask, is the data collected from women with children who are on the maternity leave or after 3 years of maternity leave who didn't want to study or
The labor force survey does not explicitly explain it. Even if you mean this, yeah? Whether you have like whether with children or not. You mean this question? Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't say it doesn't explicitly ask whether you are maternity or not. But it means they are at home, not working, not studying. That's the most important thing. Yeah. They just want to have yeah, maybe, but we don't know. But for example, in my poverty part, women said, I'm not voluntarily, taking care of my children. I really want to work, but I don't have people, to take care of my children. Either, childcare services for my two children are expensive, or they sometimes might get sick, and there's no one to take care of. Yeah.
One of the interesting findings that stood out was that I think those women with higher education tend to be more likely to be in need. I wonder if education can be used as a proxy for economic situation or income. I know you don't have data on income or economic situation, but I wonder because then so that people who are in need can eventually afford to not be in employment, for example, and people who are so. That was quite interesting. I wonder if you could draw that kind of inference or
yes. I also myself didn't expect that higher education may somewhat constrain young women from employment or education opportunities. I think one of the main explanation to that will go for cultural expectation of women to take care of children, and it means that education may not always guarantee, especially for women, to join employment or continue education. So, yeah, again, it all goes childcare services, expectations from women to be as a caregiver, right? It's all complex. Yeah.
So, for example, let's say women, if they are looking for a job, but they couldn't find, so after what time to be if this is of unemployed and the person who
Of need, yeah.
doesn't want
Of need, yeah.
experience.
The good thing about NEET is actually it's a temporary position for many. It's a temporary. For example, if say an interview from statistics committee comes to my household and asks, Nara, are you working and studying now? I say no, then I'm captured as NEET. But if, for example, they come in 3 months again to me, and then they ask, are you working and studying? I say, yeah, I'm doing my doctoral study now. So I'm derived from this, NEET category. So for me, that was a temporary position. And for many young people, it's a temporary position. What is good?
Okay, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah. So you said about that you interview people and research people that didn't have work for 4 weeks, right? But in the statistics of labor force survey, how much time they were going without work?
They may go without work.
They were going without work, yes, for the survey.
Yes, the research question, how long have you been unemployed? You can capture it. But it doesn't relate to the concept of NEET, because NEET already means you haven't been engaged in employment education for the past 4 weeks. That's what pertains to NEET concept.
Thank you. Can you speak about the inclusion and exclusion criteria of your study, briefly, so that we can understand findings in context of inclusion and inclusion of your study?
Inclusion of what?
Inclusion and exclusion criteria of your study.
Particularly
About the variables, like you consider some age brackets specifically, and you exclude others at age brackets.
you mean variables?
Yes.
For variables, for example,
Which are included in studies and which are excluded, for example, household size and.
yeah. So I excluded mobility and household size because they were not insufficient number of variables to conduct the analysis. For example, the sampling size, let's say for this year was like let's imagine like 60,000 people, but like 57,000 of them were not didn't respond to this question. So therefore I excluded these two variables. Yeah. And explanation why it's why it's so tiny, the percentage of the responses, because I read that usually household owners response to that question. For example, how many people you have in your household? Not every respondent should answer that. If one answer, okay, I have like 5 people from 15 to 69 or whatever, that's enough for the survey. So that's why it didn't match, enough sufficient number of participants.
Thank
Okay, well, thank you very much. Lots of questions, lots of interesting discussion, and I'm sure Dinara will stay for a couple minutes if you didn't get your question answered. So thank you very much for sharing your study with us. It was highly interesting. Oh, yeah. She took the time out of her day. She prepared this wonderful PowerPoint. So yes, she did. Yeah. Okay,
Thank
so,
you.
and thank you everyone for coming to this seminar.
Yeah, thank you for coming, joining.